When Prince died in 2016, he didn't leave a will for his estate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Within 3 weeks of his accidental overdose, nearly 700 people claimed to be his half-sibling in hopes of cashing in on his death. In 1964, an accident at a nuclear facility in Rhode Island resulted in the largest single full-body dose of radiation in history. The victim received the equivalent to 700,000 x-rays at the same time and died in total agony 49 hours later. Here's a photo of serial killer John Wayne Gacy hugging his sister just before his execution. The killer clown murdered at least 33 young men and boys and hid their remains under his house. He was executed by lethal injection in 1994. In 2005, Indiana man Anthony Stockelman essayed and murdered a 10-year-old girl named Katie. Unfortunately for him, Katie's uncle was an inmate at the same prison he was sent to. As payback for what he did, the man tattooed the words Katie's Revenge across Stockelman's forehead. In 1999, Anna Bogelholm was skiing in Sweden when she suddenly fell through a frozen stream. She was stuck in the ice for 80 minutes until a rescue team was finally able to free her. When Anna was pulled out, she was given CPR and a defibrillator, but the emergency team was certain that she was dead. Anna arrived at the hospital nearly 2 hours later, by which point her body temperature was 56 degrees Fahrenheit. She was connected to an EKG, which showed no signs of life, and she was clinically declared dead. But doctors weren't giving up, as more than 100 medical workers worked in 9-hour shifts to try and revive her. Miraculously, they were able to warm up her blood and achieve a heartbeat, and then proceeded to put her on a ventilator for the next 35 days. Anna eventually woke up paralyzed from the neck down, and was initially angry at her friends for saving her life. But within the next few years, she somehow made a full recovery, and now works as a radiologist at the same hospital that saved her life. This photo of Sean and Michael McQuilkin was taken at Sequoia National Park just seconds before they were struck by lightning in 1975. All three, including their photographer's sister, survived the strike, but younger brother Sean suffered third-degree burns and spent 6 months in a coma. After being unable to overcome the physical and mental toll of the incident, Sean sadly ended up taking his own life in 1989. In this photo, Japanese student Ayano Tokamasu can be seen gazing at Niagara Falls while standing on the fence. But just moments later, she lost her footing and tragically fell to her death. In 2016, a Chinese man named Jia was trying to take some selfies with a walrus at a zoo in China. But after a few pics, the massive walrus unexpectedly attacked Jia, clamping its jaws onto him and playfully dragging him into its pool. In a heroic attempt to save Jia, an experienced zookeeper tried to intervene, but both were tragically killed by the beast. When she was a child, Oprah Winfrey's family was so poor that she had to wear dresses made out of potato sacks to school. She was molested several times by her own family members and got pregnant by the age of 14 after running away from home. Oprah was apparently in so much shame at the time that she never even named her son, who was born prematurely and died shortly after birth. Squeezing a man's nuts very tightly can have roughly the same effect as using an EpiPen. But it may also kill them in the process because squeezing someone's balls hard enough can raise their adrenaline to dangerous levels. This video shows the brainwaves of a man experiencing an epileptic seizure. Seizures can have many different causes that result in a burst of uncontrolled electrical activity in the brain. Many times the patient loses consciousness, but otherwise they may experience strong tingling, anxiety, or déjà vu. In 2019, Cambridge University student Alana Cutlin tragically jumped from her airplane while returning home from Madagascar. She reportedly appeared normal while boarding the plane, but just 10 minutes after takeoff, she suddenly unbuckled herself before opening the door of the aircraft and jumping out without hesitation, falling nearly a mile to her death. Her family later stated that she'd experienced panic attacks in the past, and that she might have been suffering from a bad reaction to prescription medication. In 2012, 88-year-old Ilda Maciel died in the hospital after her nurses made a critical error while attempting to feed her. They accidentally injected chicken soup into her veins rather than into her feeding tube. In 2012, 23-year-old gaming addict Chen Rongyu died of a heart attack while playing League of Legends for 23 hours straight in a Taiwanese cafe. It took staff hours to realize he was dead since he fell back in his chair and his arms were still stretched out toward his mouse and keyboard. Benjamin, the last Tasmanian tiger, died in 1936 after being locked outside of its sleeping quarters and freezing to death at the Hobart Zoo. Ever since the species went extinct, an overabundance of their disease-carrying prey has run rampant because its primary predator disappeared, making the thylacine a strong candidate to become one of the first species to de-extinct through cloning. The quagga is a subspecies of the plain zebra that went extinct in 1883 due to excessive hunting. But the Quagga Project seeks to use selective breeding to bring these animals back, with the hope that their reintroduction will eradicate some of the invasive trees throughout South Africa. The dodo bird evolved without any natural predators, but humans eventually took advantage of this and killed them all for food. But in 2007, scientists came across the best preserved dodo sample ever found, which may make it possible to bring them back through the help of their closest living relative, the Nicobar pigeon. It may sound like something straight out of Jurassic Park, but this is all 100% real. Extinct animals that scientists are bringing back, Part 2. The science of cloning and de-extinction has been possible for decades, but there hasn't been the funding or motivation for it until now. A company called Colossal Biosciences has put together a team of scientists specialized in the field of de-extinction, and the first animal species they plan on reviving is the woolly mammoth. They'll be implanting embryos into Asian elephants using artificial wombs, existing mammoth DNA, and CRISPR technology. The company hopes that reintroducing these animals to the tundras will help make the Arctic colder by packing down the snow and slowing down the melting of the permafrost. They plan on starting with 100 woolly mammoths in a Siberian area called Pleistocene Park, and are hoping that millions of mammoths will end up taking back the Arctic within the next few decades. Colossal is striving to birth the first one by the end of 2024, and the company plans on completing its project by 2027. This picture shows a horde of people who had turned red like demons trying to cool their burns off in a tub of water, not realizing that the water was extremely hot from the blast and would end up boiling them alive. This drawing is pure nightmare fuel. There were many accounts of zombie-like people who limped for miles begging for water, while their melted skin was drooping down from their bodies. This picture depicts a pile of victims who jumped into a river to cool off after being badly burned by the blast. Tragically, most ended up drowning in the boiling hot water due to a lack of strength, and from the pain of their skin literally being peeled off by the current. The 16-year-old artist of this one wrote, "The body was so deeply charred that the gender was unrecognizable, yet the person was still weakly writhing in pain. I had to avert my eyes from the unbearable sight, but it entrenched itself in my memory for the rest of my life." 5 people were just arrested in connection with Matthew Perry's sudden death. The Friends actor was found face down in the corner of his LA hot tub after an accidental ketamine overdose last October. The actor had been undergoing ketamine therapy to treat anxiety and depression, but his last session took place more than a week before his death, meaning he was receiving injections illegally. After an underground drug operation was uncovered, charges were filed against Perry's personal assistant, 2 doctors, and 2 drug dealers, who were all allegedly involved in the distribution of the ketamine that killed him. The doctors reportedly preyed on Perry's history of addiction in the final months of his life, providing him with the anesthetic drug in amounts they knew were dangerous. According to medical examiners, the amount of ketamine in Perry's body was equivalent to the amount used for general anesthesia during surgery. Perry's family have thanked law enforcement for taking his case seriously and look forward to justice taking its course. Here's a 1990 photo of murderer Dalton Prejean with his son in prison, shortly before he was executed via electric chair for killing a state trooper. 12 years later, that same son, Dalton Prejean Jr., was convicted of the 2001 death of a 14-month-old baby. He's currently serving a 60-year sentence in the same prison that his father was executed in. Actress Tina Fey received her chin scar at the age of 5 when a stranger randomly entered her front yard while she was playing and slashed her across the face. The man was never identified nor seen again. A python from Australia became addicted to meth after living in a drug lab for several years. Police busted the operation before sending the snake to rehab for 7 months. In Japan, women are traditionally banned from entering a sumo ring under any circumstances. This tradition is so strictly imposed that in 2018, 2 women were forced to leave the ring, even though they were performing CPR on a mayor who had collapsed inside. On the morning of October 9th, 2020, 27-year-old Texas woman Taylor Parker was pulled over by a state trooper after driving erratically. She explained that she had just given birth to the baby on her lap, so they were both brought to the hospital. But upon examining her, doctors realized she hadn't actually been pregnant at all, and the true horrors began to unfold. It turned out that Taylor had a hysterectomy when she was younger and therefore couldn't bear children, which her husband threatened to leave her over. In response, Taylor spent 35 weeks completely faking a pregnancy, making herself look pregnant, faking ultrasounds, and even throwing a gender reveal party. Around the time the baby was supposed to be due, Taylor stabbed her pregnant friend over 100 times before cutting her baby out of her abdomen while the woman was still alive. Both the baby and her mother ended up passing away, and Taylor Parker was later sentenced to death for her unspeakable actions. Just last year, actor Anthony Starr received a 12-month prison sentence after being involved in a bar fight in Spain. According to reports, he drunkenly assaulted a chef by punching him in the face and smashing a bottle over his head. Starr then allegedly told the man, "You've committed the mistake of your life and I'm going to look for you. I want to kill you." The victim received 4 stitches in the hospital, and Starr managed to avoid jail time by paying him $4,000 in compensation. Bears in Russia sometimes get so desperate for food in the summer that they've been known to rip apart cemeteries and feast on the corpses of the recently deceased. In 1967, Prime Minister of Australia Harold Holt mysteriously disappeared while swimming in Queensland. He was presumed dead the next day and his body was never found. Former football star Brian Banks spent 6 years in prison until his alleged rape victim admitted that it never happened. This was the emotional moment when his innocence was proven and he was exonerated. When former NFL safety Dave Durson took his own life in 2011, he left a note that read, "Please see that my brain is given to the NFL Brain Bank." He shot himself in the chest so that his brain would be preserved, and doctors confirmed that he was suffering from severe CTE as a result of all the head trauma from playing football. In 1989, 96 people were killed during a soccer match at Hillsborough Stadium in England after being crushed to death due to overcrowding, many of whom died while standing up. 22 years later, Stephen Whittle tragically became the 97th victim. He had sold his ticket to a friend who died during the disaster. Unable to cope with the guilt, he took his own life by jumping in front of a train in 2011. At Belmont Park in 1923, a young jockey named Frank Hayes suffered a heart attack and died in the middle of a horse race. His body, however, remained on the saddle throughout the race, and his horse ended up winning, beating the odds of 20-1. Therefore, this was the first time that Hayes had ever won a race, and the last. In May of 2020, Yukon student Peter Manfredonia was having issues with his motorcycle. When 2 elderly gentlemen approached to help him, Peter pulled out a samurai sword and murdered one man while seriously injuring the other. He then circled around them multiple times with his bike before stealing another man's pickup truck and fleeing to his hometown. That's when he murdered his childhood friend and kidnapped the victim's girlfriend before driving south. Once he reached New Jersey, he fled the car alone and started walking on foot. Manfredonia's actions quickly sparked a massive manhunt that spanned multiple states and garnered national attention. However, it became increasingly difficult to locate the killer since this was during the peak of the pandemic, allowing him to easily conceal his face with a mask. After a week-long search, Peter was finally apprehended in Maryland. He was later diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses that caused him to suddenly snap. He received a 55-year prison sentence for his crimes and then apparently gained 200 pounds while in prison. Christopher Lee, the actor who played Saruman in The Lord of the Rings and Count Dooku in Star Wars, was related to Confederate General Robert E. Lee, was a flight lieutenant in the British Royal Air Force and killed multiple Nazis, climbed Mount Vesuvius 3 days before it erupted, tripped over a live bomb and survived, and released a death metal album at the age of 88. During World War II, French weightlifter Charles Rigoleau was jailed after punching a Nazi guard. He then broke out of the cell by bending the bars, allowed other prisoners to escape with him, and then beat the guard who jailed him. Lachman Gurung was a Gurkha soldier during World War II who once threw back 2 enemy grenades from his trench before the third one exploded in his hand. He then single-handedly defended his post for over 4 hours against 200 Japanese enemies, killing 31 soldiers using only his left hand. He ended up surviving and was awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions, the highest and rarest honor in the British Army. This was the final photo taken of James Gandolfini the night the 51-year-old actor suffered a massive heart attack in his hotel room in Rome, Italy. Hours before his sudden death, he scarfed down a double order of fried king prawns and a huge pile of foie gras, washed down with 2 pina coladas, 4 shots of rum, and a few beers. It would end up being his final meal. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of this photo died, but the man and his daughter happened to survive. This security photo shows teacher Dave Sanders guiding students out of the cafeteria during the Columbine High School massacre of 1999. After hearing gunshots from outside the school, Sanders sounded the alarm and saved over 100 students by herding them away from the shooters. Sadly, he was later shot 3 times and ended up being the only teacher killed in the shooting. In 2019, Salman Mirza and his ex wanted to hook up, but they didn't have a condom, so they decided to use epoxy glue to seal it instead. His friends later found him unconscious and drove him to the hospital, where he died of multiple organ failures due to the faux condom. In 1982, an Arizona man named David Grundman died while shooting a 26-foot-tall saguaro cactus to try and knock it down. But a 500-pound arm of the cactus fell on him, crushing him to death. In 2001, a man from Utah had been driving a van full of friends on a mountain when his brakes suddenly failed. But rather than trying to save them, he tried to save himself by jumping out of the car to his death, while all of his friends ended up surviving. In 2001, a Florida man was shot dead while testing out a bulletproof potion that he received from a witch doctor. After applying the potion for 2 weeks, he asked a friend to shoot him so that he could finally test it out. Turns out the potion was just cherry Kool-Aid and the man died instantly. In 2018, 16-year-old Kevin Watkins was lagging horribly while attempting to play Xbox in his Georgia family's home. In an effort to improve the speed, he decided to change the Wi-Fi password to prevent others from using it and slowing down the connection while he was gaming. Soon enough, an argument broke out between Kevin and his mom, escalating to a point where his older sister Alexis had to step in to prevent Kevin from physically harming their mother. Tragically, Kevin placed Alexis in a strong chokehold and refused to let go despite his younger brother and mother begging for him to stop. By the time police arrived 15 minutes later, Alexis was no longer moving or responsive, but Kevin still had her in a chokehold. She had been starved of oxygen for a lengthy amount of time, resulting in extreme brain damage. Alexis was quickly rushed to the hospital, but was soon pronounced dead from asphyxiation. Kevin was tried for murder and sentenced to life in prison for the tragic incident. In 1998, Dana Carvey underwent open heart surgery to clear a blocked artery, but the surgeon operated on the wrong blood vessel. After spending 6 months recovering from the life-threatening botch, he won a $7.5 million lawsuit against the hospital and donated all of it to charity. In 2015, an Italian grandma accidentally sent 2 adults and 3 children to the hospital after making them hot cocoa that had expired in 1990. Pearl Jam's song Jeremy was based on the real-life classroom suicide of 15-year-old Texas student Jeremy Wade. He was released from a mental hospital once his parents' insurance money ran out, so he brought a revolver to class and shot himself in front of 30 students. In 2013, a collection of files revealed that the U.S. government lobotomized over 2,000 veterans against their will after World War II. They were lobotomized for reasons such as PTSD, depression, schizophrenia, and homosexuality. Guy Pennington nearly died after ignoring what he thought was just a sore throat for over a month. In 2023, the infection turned out to be a massive throat abscess that became so severe it started blocking his airway, leaving him struggling to breathe. Pennington was rushed to the ICU, intubated, and flown to another hospital for emergency surgery. He later said doctors told him he easily could have died if he waited any longer to get treatment. In the early days of cars, drivers who killed pedestrians were often blamed for what newspapers called motor killings. But as deaths began to rise in the 1920s, automobile companies pushed the term jaywalker to shift blame onto pedestrians, helping normalize the idea that people hit by cars were at fault for their own deaths. The Cave Creek disaster occurred in 1995 at Paparoa National Park in New Zealand, when 17 people crowded onto a newly built viewing platform overlooking Cave Creek on a field trip. The structure suddenly tore away from the cliffside and collapsed forward, sending the group plunging nearly 40 meters onto the rocks below. 14 people were killed, most of them university students, while the survivors suffered devastating injuries. Investigators later discovered the platform had been catastrophically poorly built, with several missing bolts and critical structural flaws. However, no individual was ever criminally convicted over the disaster. In 2016, brothers Bob and James Stockless both won the lottery on the same day with randomized numbers. But one was way happier than the other, since Bob won $7 while his brother James took home over $290 million. In 1950, a Nebraska church exploded 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start. But miraculously, all 15 members of the choir were late that day for different reasons, and not a single person was hurt. When actor-comedian Red Fox was dying of a heart attack while on set, nobody offered to help him. This was because everyone thought it was nothing more than the fake heart attack act he was famous for. A Chinese woman attending her son's wedding was quickly sent to tears when she noticed a birthmark on the bride's hand. Turns out the bride was her long-lost daughter, whom she'd been trying to find for over 20 years. This 4,600-year-old Egyptian statue was made completely from wood other than the quartz and copper that make up its eyeballs. It's just one example of the incredible level of craftsmanship achieved during ancient times. These are the first ever drawings of the moon made by Galileo after observing it through his telescope in 1690. Here's a before and after of the excavation of an ancient Greek stadium located in modern-day Turkey. It was built around 1st century AD and once held a capacity of 30,000 people. This is the impressive flexibility of a Swedish Knight Sabaton from 1560. This is a watch that once belonged to a Japanese man named Akito Kawagoe. It's permanently stopped at 8:15 since that was the exact time the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. A woman snorkeling near Australia noticed this fish was wearing a gold wedding ring. She said she tried to catch it, but it swam away too quickly. A man named Walter Summerford was struck by lightning 3 times throughout his life. After his death, his grave was also struck. This person was saved from a $300 fine thanks to this absolute bro of a bird blocking their license plate from the camera. Tom Cruise divorced all 3 of his ex-wives when they turned 33, and each is 11 years younger than the last. A woman from Michigan gave birth on 8808, 9909, and 101010. The odds of this happening were 50 million to 1. This baby girl was born with the same exact white patch of hair as her mother. Anne Hathaway's husband bears a strong resemblance to William Shakespeare. Not to mention the name of Shakespeare's wife was Anne Hathaway.